Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to What is America to You? I'm your host, Derek Dempsey. I'm coming at you from New York, and when I say we are, I mean me and Jessica. Okay, before we start the show, please subscribe to our channel. We really need it right now. We're bringing all this great content to you for free. Well, for now, until we figure a way to charge you. Also, give us a like. No thumbs down, please. We're going to eventually get those, so save us. And also keep commenting. The comments are great. We'll always respond to them. Okay, our next guest has busked his way from Dublin to the streets of Copenhagen all the way to Carnegie Hall in New York City. In addition to being the front man to his own band Spooky Ghost, he has held the privileged and, might I add, well-deserved position of sideman to the likes of Duncan Sheik, Suzanne Vega, Rufus Wainwright and David Bowie, as well as touring and arranging and being musical director for the likes of Cyndi Lauper, Sophie B. Hawkins and jazz trumpeter Chris Botti. He co-wrote Suzanne Vega's album Tales from the Realm of the Queen of Pentacles. That is a mouthful, Suzanne. That is a mouthful. And he has written and composed songs with giants such as Laurie Anderson of Superman and Roger Waters of Pink Floyd. As a composer, a highlight of his career was composing songs with David Bowie for his return album in 2013, the excellent The Next Day. And he was also guitarist on David Bowie's last ever world tour. So listen, as musicians and artists, we all dream about, will I meet my hero? Will I get to be number one? Will I have like a life of sex, drugs and, well-made cups of tea that are not too strong and not too weak? And we also probably have this fantasy about, on a Tuesday afternoon, David Bowie calls you up and says, do you want to play Carnegie Hall on Friday? Well, that never happened to me, but this happened to our next guest. He did get that call and he did play Carnegie Hall, and together as a duo, him and Bowie did our next guest's arrangement of Loving the Alien from Bowie's 1984 album Tonight. And Bowie turned to our next guest and said, this is probably the way the song should always have been. A tremendous, tremendous compliment. So without further ado, like Bowie shone the spotlight that night on our next guest, we want to turn the spotlight on our next guest. Without further ado, welcome to What is America to You, Gerry Leonard.
How are you, Derek?
Great.
God, you can say the nicest things when you want to.
Well, I hope I got everything right there.
Well, we'll get to all that. It's a very long list of stuff, but I feel very lucky, and I've met and worked with all those people, and part of my journey. And I feel lucky. What can I say? I feel lucky.
I really think that it's deserved. That's the bottom line. It's well deserved. And so yeah, let's get straight to it, will we?
Yeah, let's do it.
As they said.
Ask me the hard ones first.
What's the capital of Australia? What is the capital of Australia?
It can't. No, it's not Sydney. It's
Cambria, were you going to say?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm geographically challenged amongst other things. So anyway, I wanted to ask you, Gerry, let's start at the beginning. And I'm going to throw a kind of a multifaceted list for the audience. So in the beginning in Dublin, you were a tape engineer at Lombard Studios. You saw U2, Sinead O'Connor, and the legend from Crumlin, Philip Lynott, working in a studio. And you said that in that watching Philo, you learned how to put instruments together and make what became a record. That was a big lesson for you early on. Your band, Hinterlammer, signed and headhunted, it seems, by Chris Blackwell of Island Records. You released Kissing the Roof of Heaven in 1990, toured UK, Germany, Switzerland, and many other places. And then in 92, you released Resurrect before moving to the US. So that's kind of the first phase of your career, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Dublin, as did you, and Dublin was an amazing place in a way to grow up. I mean, it wasn't the easiest place maybe to grow up, but it one thing it did have is, it was a really good place to learn your craft and be in a band. It was a great place for bands,
Yep.
and your dreams in some way. It was a little cut off and not connected enough, but a little bit cut off, and so you could have ambition without feeling like, you need a little bit of blind faith for ambition to grow and foster. And if you do, Dublin gave us that, I think.
I think it did, Gerry. I think the fact that Ireland, I might have this slightly wrong, but it felt like we had just become a first world country by the 60s. So we were growing up in the beginning of that being a first. I mean, it was tough growing up in Dublin in the 80s.
Yeah, and I see that now, even when I travel a bit in places like Czech Republic and stuff that got their independence in the mid 80s, and they're really embracing it. Dublin was doing that, as you say, in the 60s and 70s, and we were, there was a lot of pride that came with it, and there was a lot of can do in our own way. What can I say? You got to. There was enough ways to kind of like try and learn your craft, but there was also like there was maybe small steps that were achievable, and you need achievable goals when you're trying to learn something. You can't focus on the end too much, or you'll just get disheartened. But if you've got achievable goals along the way, then you can continue to grow.
Absolutely. And what I wanted to ask you about, like, obviously your goal was, you were 16, you wanted to be in the business, and you, as usual, parents don't want you to leave school. You got to meet some guy I know down in the studio. But I'm fascinated. You saw Philip Lynott working. Could you tell us, because there's a lot of Philip Lynott fans in the world, what you felt in his presence?
Yeah, so he came. I mean, it was a little bit later on when I was working in the studio. What happened was, I was very keen on the guitar. My teacher in school had showed me how to play the guitar, and I was like, I took to it straight away. And I was soaking up as much as I could. And then I was also interested in recording, fascinated with recording. And through my dad, and I got to meet this guy and went for this interview, which actually didn't exist in the studio. But I got in there as a tape op. The guy spent the first 2 hours telling me that the music business was terrible and why would I want to join it. And then it's like, what are you doing at 8 o'clock tonight? And I was like, nothing. And I started as a tape op. Actually working with Paul Thomas, who went on to Win Mullane and did all the U2 records and stuff. Great guy. But anyway, so I started working as a tape op. Wanted to leave school right then. I was 16. I had another year to go in school, and everybody was like, no, stick out school. Even the studio were like, finish your school, the job will be waiting for you. So that's what happened. And then I was working like 20-hour days. I mean, there was one point, I think I was the only, we call them assistants now. Back then you were called a tape op. And basically you did everything from making the tea, which was a lot of tea. To setting up
sex, drugs and tea.
Sex, drugs and tea. Cigarettes, tea, and pints, Chinese takeaway. But anyway, but I got to work in the studio and learned a lot. I mean, that was incredible by itself. And then, so you learn how the thing works. You learn about the microphones and the tape machines and setting them up and gain structures and compressors and all those kind of things. You're learning. But it's all a little bit of theory. We got to take the studio in the weekends, because all the show bands. This studio, we did jingles in the morning. We did the show bands in the afternoon, or trad bands or whatever, and then everybody was gigging at the weekend. So the studio was empty Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. So we got which I think was a brilliant idea of, we talked to the studio manager, we bought a roll of tape and we rent it to the bands, and we get a band in there every weekend and we do demos. So we take over the studio from like 8 o'clock Friday night till like 6 a.m. Monday morning, and we just go at it and do like 3 songs and learn your thing, right? So I was the engineer then. And I would do all the things that I saw all the other guys do. My engineer, I was the apprentice or whatever. So I would do those things, but my stuff still sounded horrible. I was like, oh my God. So, I was like, and then, I remember I was a band called Auto da Fe in Dublin.
I remember them, yep.
For them, very good band. They came in and Phil Leonard produced. And I watched him working with the band, and like everybody did the same things. We mic'd up the bass drum, we mic'd up the snare, and everybody. But then what he brought this perspective, and he started working with the musicians, working on the parts and making the sounds better, like less things would sounding better. And before our ears and eyes, like this track started to really sound like a record. And that was a huge aha moment for me, light bulb moment, where I was like, oh my God, right. It's really about these other things, the colors, the taking care of the other things, which is, part arranging, but it's using your ears, not just what you think you should do. Like, oh, I better add treble to this.
Yeah.
Maybe it just sounds like garbage and you need to mic it from a different position, or maybe the part's not right, or all of these things. So that was a huge eye opener for Phil to come in, and a giant. Look, the guy was a giant, right?
Yep. Gerry, I've never met him, but I'm going to tell you a very brief story. I had together the single from the solo album, the Philip Lynott solo album, and I loved it. I had the single, a B-side might have been whatever, Growing Up or something, and I was looking out my bedroom window in Crumlin, right on Kildare Road, and I saw this big black car coming up, and this 7-foot spider giant got out with the hair in it, and I was like, that's Phil Lynott. I ran around the room of 6 kids and 2 parents and a dog and a council house in Dublin looking for a pen. You know how hard that is to find. A hairbrush, your sock, anything. And it was a big mistake I made. I should have just went out. And when I found the pen, I went out, he was gone. Biggest regret in my life. I'd love to have met him. So you were in his presence.
That's the same pen, Derek. That's the same pen.
Phil,
never let it go.
Yeah, I'm glad you met. I mean, you've met so many great people. Rufus Wainwright, but we will get to that. But I want to ask you about, you did your album Kissing the Roof of Heaven in 1990. Now, you met Chris Blackwell from Island Records. They sought you out from your demos. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yes, that all happened. Not quite in that order, Derek. And that's just the way of the business. But we got, look, there's a lot that happened in between that. But I had worked in Dublin. I'd had my bands. I kind of gave up on everything and moved to Copenhagen. I came back, met Donald Coughlin over in Copenhagen, who was my partner in Hinterland. So we were a duo, and we were both fed up. We all had bands, and the thing about bands, the drummer would always leave. I don't know what it is with the drummer, but they always had a girlfriend and a girlfriend problem, and they had to leave. And we'd be like, no, we just got the set together, and we got an opening gig in Toners or whatever. We'd start over with another guy. So we were both frustrated with the trying to wrangle 4 guys, especially in their 20s. It's like herding cats, And so we decided we're going to do this a different way, more modern. We were going to be more of a studio band, or we both knew about recording, so we did these demos, and we got signed on the basis of the demos. So basically, we got a publishing deal with Island Publishing, and the guy head of Island Publishing, Mark Moreau, at the time, was very good friends with Chris Blackwell, and gave Chris the cassette demo of our thing. And he was on a road trip, and apparently he listened to the tape over and over, and it's like, that signed these guys. I love the guys. And then so they let us. They also like, well, there's nothing wrong with the way this is sounding, so they let us produce it ourselves, which was amazing. And during that process, Chris Blackwell came to see us in the studio, and came down and hung out, and we went to dinner. And so we knew that he was a fan, he was aware of us, and then he came to visit us, and that was amazing.
Absolutely. It seems like you were destined. I don't, we get into destiny and all, but it seems from the get-go, things either fell into place for you, or as Arnold Palmer says, the harder I work, the luckier I get. So, you prepared for the luck to stick to you when it came.
Yeah, there's a saying, opportunity comes to you, but it wants to find you ready and prepared. And I think that's true. And so I wouldn't say that everything that I did was successful, and it certainly didn't appear to be successful at the time. It felt like we were always hitting brick walls, but you kind of had to keep going and keep at it and keep a belief. And it's weird because music is such a fragile little thing. If you have a musical idea, it really starts as a fragile thing. it's not a big bombastic, moment. It's kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And then you kind of foster it and then it grows into something. And it's the same with a lot of these things. So, but that said, I mean, I did get some opportunities to me over the years, for sure. I got the opportunity to work in the studio. I got the opportunity to study classical guitar. I got the opportunity to, make a record with Island Records. I got the opportunity to move to New York. I got all these things as they came along.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I could talk a lot about that. I mean, even in New York, I had the same. New York was definitely about starting over. Not reinventing, but kind of a gathering. I have a song, instrumental called "The Gathering," and it's kind of about that. And it was about, when I moved to New York, about like trying to figure out who I was, what I had, and what I was good at, what I wasn't good at, and make a package out of that.
Well, a couple of things you said there. One, you said about the beginning. What's that movie, Dune? What's that movie? I love Dune. Dune or Dune, however you pronounce it. At the very beginning, the narrator says the beginning is a very delicate time. And you said that about songwriting. And I always feel I'd imagine working with songwriters like Laurie Anderson and Roger Waters and Bowie, you wouldn't hear no. That's something that destroys ideas when you have an idea and somebody goes, it's over. You have to treat it like a newborn baby in a way, I think. Any new idea.
Yeah, so, obviously working with people like Laurie or David, and I use the word giants, but they are giants in their world because they've gotten there through the same kind of knocks that we all go through, but they have this, they know where they are. A lot of the time we don't know where we are, and that's maybe the problem. And it's a human condition, and it's not, it's something we struggle with. But I learned a lot from those guys about how to be an artist and how to live like an artist. And there's no book you can buy, Derek, that shows you that. And I've looked, there's none. There's no section, and there's, it's kind of like there's no book to learn how to play slide guitar. I remember it was like, I want to learn slide guitar. I'm going to find a book and it's going to tell me. And I was like, no, it isn't. And so you have to kind of figure it out and figure out, look at guys who can really do it well and how they solve the problems that you find, and then incorporate that in your playing, and eventually try and make it sound good. I mean, so a musical idea can be, it's like a little acorn or a little idea. You need to be able to protect that. Eventually it's got to be able to withstand a storm. It's got to grow into something strong.
But you got to give it a chance to not to bash it off the rock straight away.
Yeah.
But when you moved to New York, I mean, I've moved here, so I get the difference. I love Ireland, but yeah. I always hated the begrudgery that you were dealt with, and that won't work. I mean, that was a given there. So when you come to America and you realize, you hear things like, oh my God, you're awesome. Why don't you come down to my? Why don't you talk to my? Why don't you call my? And all of a sudden you're getting the opposite. Rather than being told, no, it won't work, you're being told, hey, it will work.
Yeah.
So we're coming from really an Arrested Development point of view in what we were talking about countries that you travel that are gaining their independence. We grew up at the beginning of that, and really we Irish people suffer from a form of Arrested Development. So what you did in Copenhagen, what you did in New York, I don't think you could have done that directly from Dublin, as was, I think, Philip Lynott or Bruce Shields said, even prostitutes have to leave Ireland in order to be respected when they come back.
Yeah, well, somebody said it. Two things Irish people hate is success and failure. And it's kind of like hits the nail on the head because that's when you live in Ireland. That's what you're dealing with all the time. Mediocrity is okay. Don't be great. Don't be terrible.
That's true.
The difference in America is that it's a younger model for society. Let's just call it that. And there's a lot of possibility, and you're kind of like, whatever you've just done, that's who you are. I remember one time, without going too much into it, but I did this Buddhist retreat. I did this for a while, and at the end of it, we all had to speak, and I hadn't. It was a silent retreat. I hadn't spoken in 2 weeks, and I was kind of nervous, And I decided I'd write a little poem, just a little poem. So I wrote a poem, and afterwards, when everybody could speak, everybody's like, "So you're a poet?" And I'm like, "Yeah." You know what I mean? Like, I use that as an example. Like, kind of like that's who you are. If people in America think, like in Dublin, that'd be like, who the hell do you think you are? You're not.
Absolutely. That's exactly it.
And you'd have to agree, wouldn't you? You'd have to say, well, actually, yeah, you're right. There are great poets, but how did they get to be great poets? They didn't be great poets by people beating them over the head with a piece of wood all the time.
Yep.
You have to you have to allow for things, and we don't want to be uncritical, and we don't want to be that everything is a poem and everything is great, and that's no way to be either. You need to be a good editor, you need to be a good critic of yourself, but you don't want to be you don't want to give yourself this paralysis. There's enough. Look, I start a little book of things because we still go through, no matter who we are, where we are, we go through. Like, I'll get called on a session, and it seems like a really important session, and I'm nervous about it, So I have this. I start a little book of phrases, and one of them is like, "There's enough people going to put you down. You don't need to put yourself down."
Absolutely.
Just get yourself over that little hump to get yourself into the room, as they say. Get in the room and to do what you do.
That was the end of part 1 of our 3-part interview with the great Gerry Leonard. Absolutely brilliant. I'm loving it. Where do you see part 2? And where do you see part 3? Jesus, brilliant. Stay tuned. Coming at you soon.
Driving along, minding my own business, heading east through the Kentucky rain. There on the radio, Johnny Cash was singing. I hurt myself just to see if I still feel pain.